More variety.
We ain't one at a time in here. We're mass communicating.
You're listening to Para X.
Well, well, Banshee. Well, well, Banshee. Well, well, Banshee. She's coming for me. Feel her coming o'er the mountainside as I sit here by my firelight. Hear her screaming through the trees. Well, well, Banshee. Well, well, Banshee. Well, well, Banshee. Well, well, Banshee. She's coming for me. Pull my cloak around me. Darkness, darkness is all I see. Feel her icy breath on me. Well, well, Banshee. Well, well, Banshee. Well, well, Banshee. Well, well, Banshee. She's coming for me. My blood runs cold as I sit in fear. The moon turns black as she draws near. Pass me by, leave me be. Well, well, Banshee. Well, well, Banshee. Well, well, Banshee. Well, well, Banshee. She's coming for me. Ooh, 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 ooh,
Merry meet and merry part, bright the cheeks and warm the heart. For tread the circle thrice about, to keep unwelcome spirits out. Bide within the law you must, in perfect love and perfect trust. Mind the threefold laws you should, 3 times bad and 3 times good. These 8 words the read fulfill, and ye harm none, do what ye will.
Welcome to Stirring the Cauldron. Now, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Hey, merry meet everybody, and welcome to Stirring the Cauldron here on the Para X Radio Network. My guest tonight is Barry Fitzgerald, who has had over 20 years of experience within the world of the paranormal, which has taken him to new levels of intrigue and mystery. Heading the team on Ghost Hunters International, he explored and investigated many paranormal and supernatural phenomena all over the world, and this progression led to the authoring of books on the subject within the paranormal field. And Barry's new line of research has taken him out of his comfort zone and into the areas of Irish myth. His latest book, Banshee with Cormac Strain, which will be released tomorrow, is a collection of modern encounters with this legend that lifts the bizarre screaming fairy lady from the realms of myth and into reality. And to further our own reality, please join me in welcoming Barry Fitzgerald. Hey, Barry, welcome back for a little more cauldron stirring.
Marla, thank you very much for having me. It's always a joy to speak to you. You know that. I always look forward to your shows.
Oh, thank you. Well, I
Very
learn a
well.
lot. I learn a lot speaking from you to you, and this is a good thing. And to me, I mean, I love the Banshee, the subject of the Banshee, and Ireland is rich with tales and myths of fairies and ghosts and leprechauns and all other strange phenomenon. But I've read where none inspires fear the way a banshee does when the word crosses somebody's lips. Do you think
Yeah,
even do you think even more so than other harbingers of death, and why?
I think from an Irish perspective, Marla, I think she definitely has that corner of the market. There are other less important ones, of course, within Irish lore, but she definitely has took it, and we should really examine it and understand that she goes back not just hundreds of years, she goes back thousands of years. And writing this book, and really bringing to the forefront who she possibly is or what she is, and how the interaction with ourselves, how the interaction occurred with ourselves, in bringing the book together was remarkable, to say the least. I have to say, the very night that I said to my partner Donna, I said, okay, I think I'm going to write the book on the Banshee. And it was the very night that I got back to the church, because at that time I was living in an old church, and I said, let's get this done. And I wrote the initial introduction to the Banshee of what it was back then. It's changed subsequently until the release. But that very night, I got to hear her again. And I can tell you that is one horrifying thing. And at first I thought to myself, was that my imagination? What on earth? Because it had woken me up in the middle of the night, frightened the life out of me. And I went back to sleep again. And the next morning there was the email to tell me of the death that had occurred during the night as well. And then I realised, I put two and two together. I says, oh dear, there she was. But I certainly wasn't climbing out of bed to go looking for her, because that's always a bad thing to do.
I imagine so. Now, the Banshee is sometimes linked with the mythical race of the Tuatha De Danann, from which the fairy folk are descended. Is that correct?
Well, the Tuatha De Danann have been, in my particular books, have been, let's say, decommissioned. There's a new publication coming out. It's only available on ebook, and that'll be coming out in August, and that's called Searching the She, and that really delves into who the Tuatha De Danann were, and strips away a lot of that of the New Age myth, and gets right down into the nitty gritty of it. Now, there have been accounts of where the Banshee is claimed to have said that she was of the Tuatha De Danann, but from what I can see in my own work, the Tuatha De Danann are not what we are led to believe they are today, and we're able to track them back through Europe, and that took some work to get that done, but she is, from all intents and purposes, what I can see, she is of that realm of that of that earth spirit realm, if you like, because they come under many names, and again with Searching the She, we strip away that name and get right back to the core to find out who they really are. But the Banshee herself, I believe, is a distant cousin of these particular units, or these entities. She comes and goes. Now, we really don't know why she calls for certain people within a family and doesn't call for the rest. There's always been this belief system that the Banshee herself only called for people with Mac and O in their name. Well, this is actually not true. Again, that was another myth that has been stripped away within this book. And we have wonderful accounts from people all around Ireland. And it has been a real joy, I have to say, working with Cormac Strain. He's a real character, and we get along wonderfully well. And we put together some fantastic stories and encounters from people right across the island. Some of them have, yes, in all good Irish storytelling, we have some humour enclosed within the story. But there's also an edge to the stories which can be quite frightening as well. There's one particular guy who heard or was confronted by herself, and he took a long time to recover from that.
I imagine so. It's just, if she is in fact, an earth spirit like a fairy, she's known for being malevolent, maybe not in deed per se, but in what she does as in her capacity of Grim Reaper. But this also might be a good time to explain that not all fairies and little earth spirits are Tinkerbells. Some are quite huge and downright evil, aren't they?
Yeah, that was the thing, It's a misconception of the modern era that we all think that they're all little Tinkerbells, because they're not. They weren't. This is a big awakening as well, that people are starting to come around to understand again. Our ancient ancestors, they created environments in which they could worship these particular types of beings, or godlike beings, whatever you want to call them. But they had areas that they did that in. They did not mix them with their living area. They worshipped them, but kept them at arm's length. They were well aware that you don't mix with these. This carried through in part to even to this very day. There's still places in Ireland where some people would say, "Oh, that belongs to themselves," or it belongs to the wee folk or whatever, and you don't go messing in that particular area. That's still prevalent today. But the whole misconception of, I suppose, the Disney-esque version of the fairy kingdom is very, very different to the reality.
Yeah, and that's unusual because usually in Disney movies, they always have a character that scares the bejesus out of children. So for them to soften that with Tinkerbell, it's kind of strange. And in fact, speaking of Disney, my first encounter with a banshee, if you will, was in the movie Darby O'Gill and the Little People when I was a kid. And even though technology then was not so great, she was kind of electric and screaming and scared the heck out of me. But it made me very curious about these guys and these females, these she-males. No, that didn't sound right. But it was something that, wow, this is a really scary being. But I've always kind of thought of them as part of the fairy realm or, earth spirits. But I was reading this week where some people believe that the banshee is a ghost or a disembodied spirit still tied to earthly members, earthly matters, and their old families. They follow the same family. And then they follow them until every last descendant has died and been buried.
Yeah,
something?
That's not true. That's an old belief system, which doesn't hold water, really. Whenever you get down to the nitty gritty of it, a lot of the people that we have been interviewing, we can see, yes, there are certain elements, certain members she will call for, She will announce the approach of death. But there are other family members that she won't take. You know, they pass along in their own due course. Though what I discovered, Marla, was that usually when you tend to do books which tend to tread on toes like we were doing, with the Banshee and searching the she, you tend to find you get a huge amount of resistance on that, and sometimes you know not to go down that particular avenue. You know, you should leave it well enough alone. This one run exceptionally smoothly, and not only having herself come to the church that particular night, we have discovered tales of where almost a type of friendship developed from one of the encounters, where she didn't harm the family. She didn't do any of the calling and everything else, and it was a very, very strange thing to happen. And the book itself has brought the Banshee now into an area where she hasn't been for a long time, because, you know, with the influence of big media and things like that, she has been really victimized quite extensively, and I feel that the book itself brings back more of a balance, and a look at who she really is, and what she does. But as I say, you know, for both Cormac and I, it has been a real treat to speak to people and have, you know, our own experiences as well with this particular phenomenon.
It's fascinating, and I've been jumping up and down all week about this interview because I love talking about it. I've got a couple of questions from the chat room, if you don't mind. Kat is asking. She said, "The Banshee actually warns families of coming deaths too, don't they?"
She well, that's the thing. The Banshee, the Banshee, she warns the family of the coming death. She doesn't bring death. She's not death. She announces the death is coming. But in some cases, it's also believed that she actually accompanies the person to the other side. She's almost a guide, I suppose, if you like. But yeah, you know, she is that caller. Yeah.
All right. Firefly wants to know if there are any documented deaths associated with the Banshee directly, and as
in, you mean that the Banshee has got her hands around the neck?
Something like that, I guess.
She's been caught red-handed.
There you go.
She committed murder. No, I'm personally not aware of any. She will announce the death, and the death, of course, will come in its various forms. Either most times through natural causes, as in the heart gives out, or an accident or something like that. But she personally does not. She's not hands-on, let's say, with that, to answer Firefly's question. But it should be noted that when she is close by and she lets that god-awful scream, it's not just the scream that's the frightening thing. Yes, it's startling. I will admit, as an adult, it's startling. But the vibration that comes with her is that is just so overwhelming. There is something more than just the scream that comes with this entity. And that is the most frightening aspect to it of all.
Well, that's interesting you say that, because I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and she actually had an experience with a Banshee, but it was on the astral level. Mm-hmm. And she said, you know, this was something like 20 years ago, And she said the Banshee was the last thing on her mind.
Mhm.
But she said, meeting up with her and hearing the screams, she absolutely knew that it was a Banshee.
Yes.
And that kind of led me to the question about the fact that perhaps Banshees do travel in the astral plane as well as on the earth plane, yes?
Well, you see, the whole thing for us, from our understanding, is that the Banshee herself, along with her cousins, will use doorways.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where these doorways go to, God only knows. Mm-hmm. But we hear tell of these doorways that will open up, and people will see through these doorways at particular times of the year. Into other areas that just simply weren't there before, and they also see creatures that they certainly hadn't seen before. But it's the thing is about these doorways, they are a swinging door, because as much as we see them, they also stand on the other side and see us, and of course this has led to much controversy throughout man's development, right up to the modern period, as to what is it that is taking people and stealing them in the middle of the night and arriving in different places and not knowing how and everything else. The fairies have been doing that for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
Yep.
And we move into the modern age of ufology and everything else, and we look at it again and say, well, hold on a second. If we strip away that outer mask, we find the same phenomenon lies behind that. So these things have been happening for a long time. But to get back to your question, could they be on the astral plane? They could well be. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, I haven't had any problems in that particular aspect.
Not yet.
I like to keep her here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, where you can see her. Yeah. Okay, we've got another question from Steve. He said, legend has it that the Banshee screams because she is always in such horrible pain. Is that a myth?
No,
or no?
That's a myth as well. Yeah.
Okay.
There have been many claims as to what the Banshee was. They said, she was one of those ladies that was hired, a remnant of the people who were hired to keen at funerals, and these ladies would have sat down and they would have screamed the place down for the death of the person that was inside. Mm-hmm. But the truth of the matter is that the Banshee goes way back before them, way back. In fact, as Cormac even mentioned, there were mentions of this type of phenomenon even before surnames were used within the island. And in the great scheme of things, there wasn't that many people around in 400 years ago. Between I think it was 16, if I remember right now from what I was reading, from 1642 to 1652 or 51, there was originally 1.6 million on the island. Well, I think it was just over 900,000 of those were taken off the island. A huge amount of them were sold into slavery. But a lot of these stories stayed true to Ireland. Even before then, she was still wantonly straying across the island, and in fact, she's got the audacity even now to step right into the hearts of our very cities, where she is also seen and heard, not only in the countryside but right into our technologically advanced cities, and scare the absolute bejesus out of the people.
I bet. Well, we're going to talk about some of those stories in a little while, but I need to catch up with some questions here. And I got one from Cece that I really kind of like, and I never heard about this. But she said, what of the myth that silver combs on the road belong to the Banshee, and you should never pick them up or they'll curse you?
There have been the old lore to say that the Banshee would have sat and combed her hair and and if something was going wrong, well, then she would have thrown the comb at the people. Or if you seen a comb sitting at the side of the road, you were not to touch it in case it was herself had laid it there in a trap. But I'm not quite sure. We do have a story of her throwing the comb in Dublin, but outside of that, I have to say that I wouldn't be one myself to pick up a comb and start combing my hair with it. God knows who had been using it beforehand.
Exactly. I'm thinking nibs. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It may have been a story to try and stop the kids from spreading that type of stuff. But there are accounts of that comb being thrown, and that's for sure. But even yet, there are still stories, and I would certainly there's quite a lot of them that I would tend to roll with as well. If I seen the comb, I'd certainly that would spring to mind to say, no, I'll just leave it there and move on.
Yes, good idea. Mufi has a question. She would like to know, why does the Banshee feel that she needs to warn families? Pretty basic one, though. Yeah.
Yeah, it is basic. The truth of the matter is, we don't actually know. There are suggestions out there, and they are quite far out there. I have to say, mind you, we are talking about the Banshee, and there have been a few suggestions that, with her being of the she, we got to understand that within the modern age, we look at these stories of the experiments that go along within ufology and the slicing and dicing of DNA and everything else. And, there have been a few suggestions to shed some light possibly on the theory that maybe she actually just comes back for her own. Which is why she only comes back for certain members within my family units and not all the family.
Mm-hmm. And you were mentioning about the names and stuff, certain last names with certain letters in them, and I had also read that the Banshee sightings are down because in many cases lots of those families have ended.
Oh, no. No, if anything, the Banshees is healthy now as what she was 2,000 years ago. The problem is that we've got, you've heard me mention this before many times, that we live in a society where everything's getting faster and faster. We jump in cars, we stick earbuds in our ears, we listen to music, we detach ourselves from nature and what's going on around us. That doesn't mean that old stuff doesn't happen anymore. Quite the contrary. It still happens. It's just we have actually detached ourselves from it, and we camouflage those our senses, I suppose, with all this technology.
Mm-hmm. Tira in the chat room said that when she was young, the Banshee scream was described as being sorrow and despair. How would you describe her scream?
That's the thing. I've heard it now 3 times. And each time that I hear it, I recognize it straight away. Mm-hmm. But when I try and describe it, to pinpoint it, that's where I get confused. Because, yes, okay, you've got this forlorn cry, but it's the mix. There's an unusual mixture going on, and it's very, very hard to isolate that down. There wasn't an account in the book, I believe from County Down, where the guy had the opportunity to hear this all night. It just sat outside the house and cried and cried and cried. That's a rare event. To happen. Usually the Banshee will arrive and you've got a few moments and then she's off again. But this particular guy had it all night and he had a better listen to it than what the majority of the rest of us had. But whenever you hear the cry, it is something you don't forget. It's describing it is the problem. And I don't know why. I don't know why it's so hard to describe.
To your knowledge, has anyone ever captured the cry on tape?
Yes.
Oh. Okay, I just got goosebumps on that one. Sorry.
I did.
That would be very hard to listen to, I think.
It's weird. It definitely is weird. I was on the island, on Rathlin Island.
Mm-hmm.
I was working there, and I was able to get it. It's never been released though.
Good.
It's always been something. It's always been something I've sat on. And it's like many things, you know. Sometimes you come across stuff that you say that really shouldn't get out, and you just leave it. You lock it away in the vault, and that's it.
Yeah, and now there are 10 people in chat room. I want to, you know, everybody wants to hear it. See what you started.
Well, the good news is for those folks that the audiobook is coming out in early August. So the stories themselves are delivered by myself and Cormac in that version of the Banshee. And we finished the recording, and the effects and everything were added onto it. And it has turned out wonderfully well. I'm very, very pleased with it. There are a few laughs, as I say, instilled within the recording, but in other aspects, it's haunting as well. It's chilling, in fact. Best listened to in your room at night with the earphones on, and it'll draw a few tears as well. Some remarkable stories, as I say.
And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But I think since you mentioned the audiobook, you did send over a clip. And if Tim's got his ears on, Tim, this would be a good time to run it.
Several weeks had passed since my encounter on the island. Regular life had intervened, and the Banshee was the last thing in my head as I shared some social time with my friends in Dromore, a small town in County Down. A few minutes before 9 p.m. that Sunday evening, I left their home and began to walk up Meeting Street that led out of the town. Even though it was a late summer, I was aware of an unusual wind blowing against my back, almost forcing me up the hill. Glancing up, I saw a murder of black crows hovering in the wind. It's a rare event to witness such a mass of crows in modern Ireland. Thinking to myself, I'm not a druidic seer. I didn't know the significance of what I was experiencing and put it to the back of my head. Just as I did, the same cry from the island was being carried in the wind. From my spot on the hill, I was able to venture a guess that it came from the direction of the old factory. Shaking my head in disbelief, I thought it must have been a fox in the grounds of the factory. It had to be, in an attempt to convince myself she wouldn't have followed me to the mainland. With a slight increase in my pace, I peeked over my shoulder and could see I was the only one on the street. Turning back, I glanced up. The birds had gone. Shrugging my shoulders, I continued unabated.
Barry, I've read that there are good banshees and bad banshees, just like the good fairies and the evil ones. For example, Caspernia is referred to as a friendly banshee whose song is filled with love and concern for those she loves. And then the hateful ones, on the other hand, are said to scream in spiteful, hateful celebration when a member of the family meets his or her end. Is there a yin and yang factor when it comes to the types of banshee, or is this just a myth?
I certainly haven't seen those types that you've been speaking about, but there is a certain type of thing that we have noticed that has happened, in that she has warmed to certain families, and would hang around the house like I suppose like a pet robin, and would come and go, but wouldn't cry for any of that family. And for others, of course, she arrives and she announces the death, which is coming, and is specific to that particular family. But I suppose you could determine that as being good and bad. But really, good and bad, the whole concept of evil really is a perception. Whenever we sit down and really think about it, the idea of a cat from a mouse's standpoint is sheer evil. This huge animal with fangs that will finally, of course, kill the mouse. However, shift that perception to us, and the cat is a wonderful animal. So it really is just an area of perception of what she's doing in that particular time, of how we perceive her to be.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. It gave me such a fun mental picture to see this very sweet Caspernia, if that's her name, and then the hateful one, like jumping up and down, gleefully happy that somebody's passing. I mean, it's a good mental image. So just didn't know if that was actually the case or not. Now, you also mentioned that banshees appear in a variety of guises. Tell us about that.
That's right, yeah. For the most part, a lot of the banshees will appear Banshee or banshees. We don't really know, is there many or are they just one singular, is it one singular entity? But she has been known to appear widely in the form of the old crone. This reflects back as well to the old deity worship in the guise of the Trinity. Another form that she's said to appear in is that of a beautiful young girl. Of course, the animal as well. So there's the three forms that she's said to appear, and that in itself is reflective of the old Celtic deity, the Morrigan, who was the goddess of war, and she was denoted as making herself known in the battlefields as the Black Crows. And she, of course, was came out of the underworld at Rathcrucken, down in Roscommon, and that in itself is another amazing place in that it's something that even a lot of the Irish don't know about, that you can simply go to this place and descend into the ancient underworld, the doorway to the underworld, where their belief systems stated that at Halloween the doorway opened and these beasts descended onto the landscape and wreaked havoc. But that doorway is there. We can go and visit it, and we just got to know where to look. And it really is an amazing place. And again, that's connected with the Morrigan, who is also allegedly connected with the Banshee herself.
And it's interesting you said that, because I did find some information that they do appear in a variety of forms. They called it a hooded crow, perhaps, a hare, a weasel, a stoat, although I'm not quite sure what a stoat is.
It's a small version of a weasel.
Oh, okay. All right. And they tie that in. They're saying that the animals that she would appear as are animals that are all associated in Ireland with witchcraft, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah. Again, that would be a later belief system, but yeah, it's amazing to see how a lot of the older belief systems really do work with Ireland in the modern day. We live in an island where the Celts 2,500 years ago placed down a map. It's called the Celtic Wheel, and in the west of Ireland, within that wheel, it was always known that if you wanted to know the ancient knowledge, you went west, and if you wanted to know anything about the arts, poetry, music, and things like that, you went south. Now, if you wanted to set up politics, laws, setting up home, financial affairs, you went east.
Wow.
And if you wanted to know anything about war, you went north. Now, if you take that Celtic map of 2,500 years ago and put it onto Ireland today, it hasn't really shifted. And it's amazing to see how the landscape really does affect us on a subconscious level that we're not even aware of.
Wow. That's interesting. I like that. And I wonder how many people still hold the beliefs about the different areas and their function, for lack of a better word.
I live in the West now, and I have to say it is such an amazing place, because this really, it really is very much the seat of the ancient knowledge. And as I say, it's an amazing place, an amazing experience to actually get to see it and live it.
Maybe this is where you're finding your muse to be so prolific with books and your studies. Maybe it's drawing you in. Yeah, kind of like that. Yeah, you just said something a minute ago that we don't know if the Banshee is one or there are many.
Yep.
And that is kind of interesting, because her appearance would be then obviously simultaneous at different times, almost like she was splitting into bits from one.
We talked earlier as well about the whole astral thing as well. Is it possible that she could be astral? The whole idea, the whole I suppose concept of astral and everything else is that its journey within the astral isn't so much a journey as in I would step from my computer here and walk out to the front door. It can be instantaneous. And I think this is probably something very, very similar, in that she has got the ability to pop up all over Ireland, in different places. And of course utilize the old doorways as well, because those old doorways are still there. Many of them, of course, are buried. Since we had the huge catastrophe within Europe around 4000 BC, our climate change shifted overnight, and that affected most of the old gateways in northern Europe, and many of them became buried underneath the old bogs. But some of them are still there. Some of them are still active. There's a new range of books that I'm working next with Cormac Strain, and we actually start experimenting and visiting some of those old doorways, and the adventures that ensue from doing that.
Wow. Yeah, because you wonder, just by being in proximity of them, is there anything you're going to sense or feel drawn to or something? That could be quite interesting.
Well, some of the doorways that are still active, there have been tales of this unusual phenomenon which has been reported, and I must say disappearances of people. And that's something that we really want to get into and look at, and see how also some of the sites have actually been built upon by some of the newer religions that came to Ireland, and stamped their authority almost on top of it, sealing those old doorways. And we're going to be exploring some of those places as well, and getting back into the nitty-gritty, into the history. And also, it was exceptionally important for us that we supplied the coordinates of these places so people could go and visit for themselves. But also, from our standpoint, we had to stay at that location. So we're putting ourselves into that situation. We're staying there, and we're writing about our experiences.
Wow, that's almost similar to those who get lost in the world of fairy,
Exactly.
being drawn in and come back, leave a breadcrumb, or two, so we could find you in case you both decide to go missing temporarily.
That's why Cormac's there. Boot in the back. Let's go see what's in there, Cormac. You go first.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah. You need the guinea pig to test it out first. It's very wise. It is indeed wise. But you were talking about the possibility of the Banshee being in many places at one time. It made me wonder if it's also possible for spirit to do that. Can spirit, in your experience, be in more than one place at one time?
Yes. Because as I say, the whole idea of thought is immediate. and they don't have the same restrictions as we do.
Exactly.
And, it's very easy to pass from one to the other, without having to cart around this huge carcass, and be restricted by the laws of physics. So it is very, very easy for them to come and go just at the speed of a thought.
I like that. That almost makes it worth waiting to get there so we can do it, right? In a sense. Almost, I said. Not in any hurry to try it out, but it's good to know that possibility will be there. It's probably like the cherry on top of the ice cream sundae or something.
And then, there's the whole aspect of reincarnation and everything else, and you begin to wonder, well, you often hear tell of the tales from India that speak of the children eating the forgetful fruit so that they can't remember who they were beforehand, before coming back. And I think to myself, God, I don't really want to be coming back. Give me a break. Give me some time off.
Well, I've heard that you can decide when you'd like to come back. You don't, it's not mandatory to a certain time. You can relax and take your time and do all your exploring on the other side. And then when it's right, you decide then. All right, so another bit of information. See, I was doing a lot of digging, just not to confound you, but just out of curiosity. I found out that, I read that sin and consequences are also under the domain of the Banshee. Like if a person lived a life of selfishness, decadence, or committed cruel acts in their lifetime, it was believed that their soul would remain close to the earth, suffering the penance and being restrained by the Banshee. So she would be the policeman and force them to pay for their sins. And, conversely, she would help those that were good people. But I kind of like the thought of her being the hatchet man to make sure this punishment was carried out. Now, is this something that
I hate to burst your bubble, Marla, but that also is not true. Because she comes from the she, she's their distant cousin. They do not care whether we live or die. They don't care what we do to each other and everything else. They're very, very indifferent. And she is very much the same from that particular aspect. And whenever she does take a liking to someone, it's not like the same friendship that would develop between two people of this realm, where you've got your best friend, you go out for coffee and you chit-chat and things like that. It's exceptionally different. It's almost like befriending a wild animal that sits out in your grass and does what it does, and you acknowledge it, and that's as far as it really tends to go. She really doesn't get involved in all the mundane stuff that we trap ourselves in with how we treat or how we react with each other, or if we get involved with financial situations or whatever the story is. She really doesn't get involved in all that. Those are man-made things that she's very indifferent to.
Well, I kind of like the fact that I'm finding all these things that are misinformation, because it helps clear up a whole lot.
That was a big thing for the book as well. Because I don't know why, but I got very annoyed whenever I read that someone had said that on the internet that the Banshee hadn't been heard since the 1940s. I thought that's nonsense. She's been heard time. And another one was that it was only the dying that heard the call of the Banshee. Again, that was wrong. So that this is one of the reasons why I wrote the book with Cormac, to really start setting things in motion and really clearing the air as to what she does and possibly where she comes from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what makes it so fascinating. Because, and I'm finding all these things that you've said were not true that we've talked about tonight, they were all very dramatic, weren't they?
They were.
Very colorful, like a story passed down from generation to generation, like Chinese whispers. They just keep getting bigger and bigger.
I think it was really in itself was a way. It was a reflection on religion as well, because She didn't fall into the whole Christian thing. Whenever that really took hold in Ireland, and they really had to try and find a way of, okay, how can we incorporate this into what she does, and fear is still a big thing with the Banshee, and having heard her at the church window, I can tell you that is a huge element to her, is the fear, and as you can imagine, being out in a country lane, minding your own business, and trying to get back on the cusp of darkness, and all of a sudden this scream emanates over the hedge. I can tell you the fear that someone would have felt 200 years ago would have been mighty. And I'm wondering myself, and many people actually did pass away at just the sudden fright. But the whole thing was, for us again, was about setting things straight, about getting all the T's crossed and the I's dotted, whenever we started to do this book, and it has been an amazing experience for us in doing this and meeting with the people, and even now we're getting in more stories, which are fantastic stories, and probably will go toward a second edition. Maybe we'll get a collection and release a lot more. But it has been a wonderful experience, and of course, it has led into Searching the She, which is out on August the 16th, which really does analyse who the fairy really are within Ireland, and getting back into that history and stripping away a lot of the old masks, revealing some truths which really make us very uncomfortable, and having placed myself in some of those locations where the She are said to operate, I can tell you here and now, Marla, I saw some strange things that I cannot explain. And I don't know, I really don't even know how to go around explaining them. I just simply can't. I write what I experienced, and I was brought full circle, right back into the depths of the earth. I was brought, with researching Searching the She, and again, that's going to be in the back of the Banshee, and it's going to be another great read for people if they really want to find out what these things are and where can they find them. Probably best not to go looking for them, really.
Not from all the stories you tell and that we read. I mean, don't look the fairy queen in the eye, because she will take you into her realm, that kind of thing. And I forget his name, who was lost for 7 years. And
that's the thing which we did notice, is that when you are dealing with the Fae and their brethren, you will have lapses like that, and like the Banshee as well. She did not like to be spied on, and she will take her vengeance, like the fairy. It's best to leave her well enough alone.
Yeah, and I just want to go back 1 second to, you were talking about the fear that the Banshee instills in people with the cry and everything. Is this purposeful, or is this just her? Not that she's meaning to put the fear of God in people when they hear her, but do you think it might be on purpose?
I think it is on purpose, because in Ireland we've got a lot of things that cry in the middle of the night. You've got foxes, you've got, as you pointed out, you've got different wildlife there that can make some screaming. An injured hare, my God, can sound like a child at night.
Yes.
But the thing is, those particular calls, they're something that we would see as mundane, and we won't register those as we walk along the road. But when the call comes from the Banshee, that comes with a vibration. That vibration signifies that this is different. Mm-hmm. And like all things paranormal, there's a difference comes with it, and it's something that we don't forget. And this is the way that she signifies her calling from the normal calls of the nighttime and everything else. It is very, very purposeful, I believe. And her cousins, of course, also utilize vibrations as well whenever whenever they get into dealings with the human race and things like that. So there's always a particular vibration that's involved with the meetings. And I would definitely say that it is that vibration is meant to be there. It's meant to cause the vibration, or it's meant to cause that fear, because that's something we have to remember. She called for a particular reason.
Almost in mythological terms, like the siren, whose call was very hypnotic and drew the sailors in and crashed them on the beach or whatever against the rocks.
Right.
So okay. So is the Banshee strictly connected to Ireland, or have they been reported in other countries?
She has been reported in other countries. Primarily, though, I have to say that a lot of the stories are reflective of Ireland. She is not seen on the water. Even the fishermen that drowned off the coast of Ireland multiple times, she has never came or keen for any of their loss. And she definitely does call for those on the land rather than on the sea. Ireland is full of stories. There was a plaque that went up recently this year to commemorate the sinking or the drowning of over 80 fishermen on the west coast of Ireland. And the finger was pointed actually at a particular witch who was said to have conjured up the waves and everything else and drowned all these people. So that's, those stories are all there. And again, that's something that Cormac and I want to have a look at whenever we start working on Legend Seekers, and start exploring those and bringing those to the forefront, because there are amazing stories here in the island. And let's face it, us Irish, we love a good story.
And tell a good one too.
And you do tell a good one, yeah. And it's something which we felt that we are losing because of TV and things like that. People don't meet the same anymore. We don't have the Cayley houses where people would have come round and there would have been music and storytelling and of course there would have been copious amounts of alcohol drank as well, which made for a very interesting walk home. But those really don't happen today. And it's in its own right. It's a shame, because that was a community coming together, and they shared those particular elements. And with the audiobook that we're bringing out of the Banshee, we're hoping that we can bring some of that essence back again, and deliver that right into the people's homes.
It's just in your telling and talking about it tonight, you're doing that. Because I'm completely enthralled, and I'm loving every second of it. So, but then I'm easy. And then again, you heard me chuckle when you said the witch drowned a bunch of people. That I think I had a gleeful chuckle for 1 second. But that's a whole nother story. So do belief systems come into play when dealing with myths and legends? For example, if we take the Banshee out of Ireland and suppose there's a family here in the States who has no notion of them, and they hear the cry, would it affect them? I mean, as far as her cry and her purpose?
I do know that people have been affected that are not part of the whole essence of Ireland. They're from other countries. There's a particular family that we write about. They're a German family, and they had just moved to the country. They were during the reign of the Celtic Tiger, and everything was going great for them. And they ended up. The Banshee came to call at them as well. Now, they're German. They had no Irish connections whatsoever with the island. And after she had finished keening in their house, they got the phone call that her father had passed away in Germany. Immediately after, in fact. It does happen to people who are not even Irish. This is a reflection as well on the old belief system that she only calls for the people of Mac, and O in their name, that's not true either. Why she selects these people, we really don't know. She only knows the answers for that. And she ain't talking to me.
You have to sweeten up a little bit. But no, I understand that she... And one of the things that I've noticed during this conversation is every time you refer to her, it's with reverence.
The strange thing is, I do have a big reverence for her with dealing with this. And it's the same I find with a lot of the old Celtic heritage or the ancient Irish heritage. I do have a lot of respect for it, and a lot of respect for the people who have gone before me. And that's just who I am. I tend to give reverence where reverence is due. Mm-hmm. And I feel that she deserves this, because I feel, and this is my own personal belief, I feel that within the last 100 years she has become victimized in her own way, with the stories that have been passed around of things that she does and why she does them, and conflicting stories. So I suppose really, with her permission, I have written this book with Cormac and delivered a new message.
Is there just a tiny little bit of fear involved in this reverence as well?
Oh, absolutely. And it's always healthy. It's always healthy to have a bit of fear.
Sorry, I had to ask. Well,
I have to say that other book that I was talking about, Searching the She, I have two horrible fears above anything else. Forget spiders, forget heights and everything else. I have the fear. My nightmares are plagued by two extreme fears. One, believe it or not, is UFOs, and the second one is cave systems. Oh. And I found myself on the top of a mountain at 3 a.m. in the morning, having to descend into a cave system. And I was on my own, bear in mind, and I was challenging my personal fear, which was exceptionally powerful. But from doing that and succeeding in overcoming that fear to a point, the next day I was up a ladder. I was painting away at the house. I was doing what I needed to do, and there wasn't a bother. So it was healthy in a way, confronting those other fears, because it helped me deal with the element of height and everything else. So it paid off.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. Well, I think we've got time for one tale about a modern encounter, because you were talking earlier about she perhaps, is getting very bold and going into cities and modern times and showing herself where you would not expect her to be.
She is indeed. Poor Tony Brown from Dublin. He was a man in his 40s and a very well respected guy, and everything was going great for him. I was coming late in the evening and he was washing the dishes, and he opened the window, went back to washing the dishes, and he started to hear this cry. And initially, and let's put this out there, this guy does not believe in the Banshee, he doesn't believe in fairies, he doesn't believe in ghosts. So he's a very level-headed guy from that standpoint. And he had to leave out his washing on the clothesline at the end of the garden. Now, this is one of the old Victorian-style gardens, very, very long. So when he switched on the light to go out into the garden, it maybe shone maybe 20, 30 feet if he was lucky, but he was reaching the end of the abilities of the garden light when he started to see something move near the bottom of the garden. Now, I was holding a washing basket, bear in mind, and he stopped and stood and looked. Now, this is where we see that she does not like to be spied on, because this figure suddenly stopped and it straightened itself up and turned around and looked straight at him. Now, it was still far enough away for him, he wasn't able to see detail, but he knew there was a white figure at the end of the garden. Within seconds, and I mean split seconds. This thing was in his face. And he dropped the washing basket and protected his face as this thing advanced toward him. And he didn't even acknowledge the fact that she was actually floating in the air, and she was face to face with him. And the fear that was generated in those moments terrified the living bejesus out of this guy. Life went on. Life went on around him. This was the strange thing that I noted. Buses and everything were passing up and down the front of the house. Everything was great. And whenever he finally dropped his hands, she was gone. Now, it was one of those tales where we can see that she comes right into the cities looking for these people for whatever reason. But you do not go out of your way to look at her, or she will take it out on you. Like her cousins, they've even been known to give blindness for people who sneak to peek. So it was something a very rare thing to see. And poor Tony had to go through some counselling sessions to try and get straightened out in his head about what he had actually saw. And it took him a long time to recover. And that happened in 2008. So It wasn't long ago.
No. Well, this is good incentive for everybody to go buy the book, because if this is a sample story, it's fantastic. And it's not exactly the call of the Banshee I'm hearing right now, but if we don't wrap up, Tim is going to start sounding like one. So as we mentioned earlier, the book itself is available as of today.
Yes.
And the audiobook is due to be released when again?
We're hoping the audiobook will be released early August. The paperback and ebooks are available from today at charmstealer.com.
I love it. And while they're there, let's not forget Searching the She as well, because they could probably pre-order, yes?
Searching the She is only going to be available in ebooks.
Okay.
So it's released in August the 16th. For the folks for some folks that are ordering their personalized copies of the paperback, I'm just slipping in a little postcard to remind them of Searching the She out on August the 16th.
Can I impose on you to come back right before it's released so we can tantalize folks with some tales of the she?
You can indeed, of course, Marla. I always enjoy it.
Oh, thank you, because this is stuff that's right up my alley, and I absolutely love it and love the way you tell the tales. So I want to thank you for sharing your terrific new book, and I look forward to talking to you again soon about the she.
Thank you.
And I want to thank everybody for listening in as well. Go over to charmstealer.com and have a look and order books. And until next time, everybody, blessed be and merry meet again. Good night.
This has been another edition of Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks. Be sure to tune in next week at the same time for another great guest and more fun. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2009.
You have been listening to the Para X Radio Network.